This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
In progress.
Okay, good evening everyone. Shalom Aleichem. This week we begin the Shiurim on Sefer Vayikra. The Shiurim on Sefer Vayikra, we thank once again our dear friend Dr. Zakheim and Mishpachta Nishmas, Reb Shlomo Eliezer and Reb Yaakov Zakheim, and Rivka Bas Tavi Halevi, and Reb David ben Reb Yaakov Tzvi HaKoyen. And we appreciate that the Mishpacha Zakheim is dedicating Sefer Vayikra. Thank you very much. The Shiurim of Chodesh Adar Beis are sponsored Le'iloi Nishmas Ava Bas Ilana Esther B'Gan Eden Te'emenu Chasa. She should have an Aliyah B'Gan Eden. Tonight's shir is sponsored by our dear friend Rabbi Yaakov Mizrahi of the land of Israel. Tonight's shir is anonymously dedicated by a dear friend as a Sudas Hoida. Tonight's shir is dedicated by Yuri Curtis, Le'iloi Nishmas Shloima Teveli ben Abraham, and as a chus for a shidduch for Sarah Bas Chava, and thanking Rabbi Glatstein for all his brilliant shiurim in London. Don't think that means brilliant like in America. In America, brilliant means brilliant. In London, it means they were decent. Brilliant, you know? Basically, if you drink water and you could tolerate it, it's brilliant. So that's the only reason. Anyway, London was brilliant. It was great. As I told you, I love teaching there, but the jokes do not go over. Okay, so tonight we're going to speak about the Yom Tov of Purim, Haba Aleinu L'Tova, and I'm sure many of you know. Actually, where is it? Isaac, hold it up. Everybody look. That's the last available copy of the Hebrew Sefer in America and in Eretz Yisrael. Last copy. So you can't even get it. It's already spoken for. But hopefully we're going to reprint it for next year. We're working on reprinting the Sefer on Pesach, on Nisan. Should be ready for this next couple of weeks. If you don't yet have the Concealed and the Revealed, big and small, you could still be Mikayim the great mitzvah of getting it before Purim. Okay, we have a very important shir tonight. We know that on the Yom Tov of Purim, aside from the four mitzvahs Hayom, you have the mitzvah of Sudas Purim, you have the mitzvah of Mishlayach Manos, of Matanos of Yoinim, of Mikra Megillah. There's also a mitzvah the Gemara talks about Amar Rava, Chayiv Inish L'Besume B'Puraya Ad L'Yada Bein Ar Haman L'Baruch Mordechai. There's a mitzvah to drink, and not just to drink a little bit, to imbibe and become inebriated and even intoxicated, which is one of the most difficult mitzvahs to understand. After all, in Judaism, the thing that we value more than anything else is das. By the way, I'll tell you an unbelievable thing. The forces of evil are 480, right? Lamed Yod Taf, 480. Do you remember that number? Lamed Yod Taf. The Mishkan counteracts that. Who puts up the Mishkan? Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu has Hadas. Hadas is 479. So how is he going to get to 480? That's the Aleph Ze'ira, the small Aleph of Vayikra. That's a continuation from the end of Pekudei to the beginning of Vayikra, that at the end of Pekudei, Moshe only has 479. So he still has to get the Aleph Ze'ira to counteract 480. That's why the Mishkan is 48 Krushim, each one is 10 amos tall, 480. Fine. What do we value more than anything else? Das. The most important thing in Judaism is to be able to maintain one's ability to think and to choose. And most of the ills of mankind, of the world in general, came through excessive intoxication, starting with the very first day of creation. God tells Adam, you want to drink apple juice, iced tea, lemonade, Snapple peach, Snapple mango, Snapple half and half, Snapple cranberry, whatever you name it. You want to drink Turkey Hill with peach flavoring, whatever you want to drink. I recommend Turkey Hill Diet with mango, but you could drink any drink you want. Just don't drink the wine, right? Rameir Shita is Eitz Hadassa's wine. And immediately, Adam Arishon drank the wine, and he had the first Kiddush Club. So anytime you see people going down for Kiddush Club, they're just emulating Adam who brought death to the world. That's all they're doing. All the ills of society came from the first Kiddush Club. So that's the basic, if you wanted to know how you should view it in a nutshell. Anyway, and then Noach comes out of the Teva, and Noach becomes intoxicated. And most of Sefer Mishlei talks about the ill effects of drinking wine. And here it is, it's Purim, it's one of the holiest days of the year, and Chazal basically say, drink till you drop. What's the meaning of this mitzvah? Why is yayin such a prominent part of Purim? So the Elya Rabbah writes, and it's codified by the Be'er Halacha, that most of the miracles of the Purim story came through wine. Vashti was executed at a mishta yayin. And then Haman had his downfall at a party of wine. Esther's mishta. Therefore, in order to properly commemorate the miracle of Purim, Chazal ordained that we should drink wine on Purim, and this way we'll remember the narrative of the Purim story, yeah? But still, this is very difficult. Is it really worth it? I mean, it's a dangerous thing. If somebody drinks too much alcohol, more than their liver could handle, they could kill themselves in one Purim.
Well, why not just say make Kiddush?
Just drink a cup. Yeah. What's this issue of commemorate now? But here's the real question. In the times of Purim, there was a decree on the Jewish people. What was our fate going to be? Lahashmid, laroig, ula'abed, minar ve'ad zaken. This was the single most disastrous gezerah that ever loomed on the heads of the Jewish people. Never in our history did God, and not only did Hashem allow it to happen, God signed it. He signed it, albeit with tit, not with dam, but God signed it. Did it ever happen in our history that the Rebbeinu Shem signed a decree to annihilate the Jewish people? In other words, Hashem created the world for who? Bereshis, for us. He gave us the Torah, and then He told Haman, you know what? I'm done with them. I'm finished with them. I don't need them anymore. Dispose of them. Annihilate them. It never happened in our whole history. So we must have done something really bad. What did we do? We went to the party and we drank at the party. Why in the world commemorate the biggest sin in our history? Can you imagine? Oh, you know what you do on Purim? We call our friends, we call our neighbors, we gather together, and we commemorate the biggest sin in the history of the Jewish people. I mean, do we have a day on our calendar that we all come to a big fire, we throw gold into the fire, and we make a golden calf to commemorate the Chet HaEgel? Do we ever come together and slander Eretz Yisrael to commemorate the Chet HaMeraglim? I mean, that would be national suicide.
Are you saying that coming to the Mishnah was worse?
Yeah, it was much worse, because these other decrees did not elicit a decree from Shemayim to destroy us. The single worst Aveira the Jewish people ever did was go to this party. It was a celebration that the Beis HaMikdash was not being rebuilt. Imagine if Jewish people would celebrate the fact that, oh, we're in Galus, the temple is destroyed. That would be disastrous. The greatest disaster, the worst sin that we ever committed was going to the party of Achashverosh. And here it is, what do we do on Purim? We invite our friends, we invite our neighbors to re-experience and reenact the worst sin in the history of the Jewish people. Why do we do that? Why would we do that? Is there any logic to that? Furthermore, we're commemorating
Makas Kosher, which 4/5 of the Jews die.
How do we commemorate Makas Choshech? How do we commemorate Makas Choshech? We have blackouts?
We don't say.
No, okay, we remember the miracle, but to have a mitzvah to re-experience an Avera, that's rather unusual. By the way, Rav Shlomo Kluger asks furthermore. Now this, Rav Shlomo Kluger has a sefer on the Megillah. I haven't been able to find the sefer for over 10 years. It's called Mamar Esther. I think I found it on Hebrew Books. They may have reprinted different Chidushim Rav Shlomo Kluger among many of the things that he wrote, but just a straight up Sefer Mamar Esther, I have not been able to find. Rav Shlomo Kluger asks a very simple question. We have a rule in Judaism that the prosecutor will never be the defense attorney. Ein kategar, nasa sanegar. So in other words, on Yom HaKippurim, the Kohen Gadol is not going to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim wearing golden clothing because it's going to remind Hashem of the Egel. Now let's think for a moment. Oh, you lost the sound? Could you hear me? Now, 1 second. Rabbi Gedalia Schwartz wants to know which sefer. Gedalia, I have to tell you, even though this is the middle of this year, that in the upcoming Purim Rav skit, he does a routine, and you made it into the Purim skit. Okay, so just beware of that. Okay, in any event, okay, so Rav Shlomo Kluger asked another question. The name of the sefer is Maimon Mordechai. Ask Rav Shlomo Kluger. Normally there's a rule, Ein kategar nasa sanegar. Yeah, the prosecutor will never be the defense attorney. What caused Haman's downfall? Who remembers? What caused Haman's downfall? The party of Esther. So that means Haman had a downfall through a party. Why would Hashem allow a party to bring about the downfall of Esther when the party was the sin of the Jewish people? We sinned at the party. That's why Hashem allowed Haman to make a decree to annihilate us. So Hashem is going to use a party to bring about the downfall of Haman? How does that fit into the general rule of Ein kategar nasa sanegar? How could Hashem use a party to bring about Haman's downfall? The party was the sin. How could it bring the salvation? Okay. This week's Haftarah, the Haftarah of Parshas Zachar. This week it's Parshas Vayikra. We read about the mission of Shaul and the failed mission of Shaul. Shaul was charged to wipe out Amalek. And Shmuel comes and he hears sheep and he sees their survivors. Vayavai Shmuel el Shaul. Vayomer lo Shaul. Baruch atah Hashem. Haki moisi es devar Hashem. Shmuel came to Shaul. He said, what in the world's going on here? I'm a prophet. I told him to kill out Amalek. And Shmuel comes, he sees the king is there. He sees all the sheep. And Shaul confidently says one of the most bizarre comments in the whole Tanakh. Haki moisi es devar Hashem. I upheld the word of Hashem. I upheld the word of Hashem. So the question is, what? He did everything but uphold the word of Hashem. Not only is he not excusing himself for not fulfilling the word of the prophet, he's saying, I fulfilled the word of Hashem. Actually, no, you didn't. You blew it. What did Shaul mean? Hashem. And then Shmuel says, so what's the sound of the sheep in my ear? V'koil habakar. The people had mercy on the best sheep and the cattle to slaughter to God. And the rest of it we got rid of. And then Shmuel says the epic comment. God doesn't want your sacrifices. He doesn't want your mitzvahs. He doesn't want your good deeds. God's not interested in your agenda. All the Rebbeinu Shalom wants is Hine Shemaya Mizevach Toiv. Just listen. You ever have that with your kid? You know, why are you up? Well, because I was just doing this, I was just doing that. I told you to go to sleep. Yeah, but I was doing it to help you, pal. Just listen, right? You never had that, right? Just listen. You ever had that with people? Why'd you do this? No, because it was for you. I don't want you to do things for me. I want you to listen to me. That's what God says. You know, I learned so much. I learned during Chazar Sashatz. God said, I don't want you to learn. I just want you to listen to me. Just listen to the halacha. Don't do me favors. Listen. That's a general principle. That's why it's connected to Parshas Vayikra. Vayikra is nachas ruach sha'amar v'asisa ritzoni. You know, we want to bring God nachas. Don't do him favors. Just simply listen to him. Anyway, when God gave us the Torah in Har Sinai, what was our reaction? No, thank you. Not interested. We don't want it. Yeah, the written law, we'll take the written law. Oral law, no thanks. No thanks. So God said, please. We said, no way. God said, you really should do it. We said, not a chance, I'm not interested. So God took the mount. He said, either take it or I'm going to kill you. So he said, oh, okay, yeah, we want it. And when did we accept it willingly? Purim.
No, before.
When?
Sham Sam Lochol.
In Mara?
Mara, they got
Yeah, they got some.
dinim and
They got a little flavor. Tayameha.
That's the reason we say when
Ozmi Sinai.
when Yom Tov comes in Shabbos, we say Be'ava.
Right.
But over there we got it in
Yeah, but we just got, it was Ba'avo because we got a few sprinklings. But once we got the whole thing, no thank you. How long did it take in the Midbar after 40 years? No. 440 years in Israel? No. 410 Bayis Rishon? No thank you. 70 years later we took it. What happened 70 years later that we accepted the Torah Ba'ava? We went to a high level then, actually went to a very low level. We committed the biggest sin in our history that we ate at the Suda of Achashverosh. So how all of a sudden do we accept the Torah Ba'ava? Another interesting thing, take a look at number 7. For all you word aficionados, Vayikohalu ha-Yehudim asher b'Shushan. The word Yehudim often in the Megillah is spelled with 2 yuds. V'ha-Yehudim asher b'Shushan. It's written V'ha-Yehudiyim. We read it V'ha-Yehudim. What's that extra yud doing there? Okay? Next question. You ready? I want to know. I'm going to put you on the spot now. Who's Kish? Who's the guy? Who's Kish? Who's Kish? Raise your hand if your name is Kish. Do you know anyone named Kish? I know the thing you put in the cholent sounds like it. Who's Kish?
Father of Shaul.
Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan habirosh my Mordechai ben Yair ben Shemi ben Kish ish Yemini. Who's Kish? I'm going to tell you who he is. Very good. Look in Targum Sheni. Targum Sheni number 13. Targum says his name was Mordechai ben Yair ben Shemi ben Shmida ben Bana bar Ela bar Micha bar Mephibosheth bar Shaul bar Kish, bar Aviel, bar Tzrar, bar Bechoiras, bar Afia, bar Shecharim, bar Uzziah, bar Sheshach, bar Michal, bar Eloel, bar Amiud, bar Shvataya, bar Pesuel, bar Pisoin, bar Melech, bar Yerubal, bar Yerucham, bar Chananya, bar Zavdi, bar Alpal, bar Shimri, bar Zechariah, bar Merirus, bar Chushim, bar Shechoira, bar Azza, bar Gera, bar Bela, bar Binyamin. Kish was the father of Shaul. So Ushmai Mordechai ben Yair ben Shemi ben Kish 20 generations earlier Ish Yemini. So the obvious question is, if Kish is the father of Shaul, why is Shaul not in the lineage here? Where did Shaul go? So therefore the Ibn Ezra says this Kish is a different guy. Because if he was the father of Shaul, why wouldn't it mention Shaul? Shaul is more prominent than Kish. You never heard of Kish. Shaul you heard of. You know people named Shaul. You don't know anyone named Kish. You never went to a bris. V'yikar Shemai, Kish ben I don't know what. So why isn't Shaul on the list? Ibn Ezra says it must be a different Kish. The problem, and therefore Ibn Ezra says there is no basis that Mordechai comes from Shaul. The only source that Mordechai comes from Shaul is because Kish is the father of Shaul. But obviously this Kish is not the father of Shaul. So it could be Mordechai comes from Zavulun. He comes from Binyamin. Yemini has many Perushim. Ibn Ezra rejects the proof that Mordechai comes from Shaul. The problem though is, the Gemara says Mordechai comes from Shaul. So the Ibn Ezra, as is his derech, argues on the Gemara. The Ibn Ezra will often say commentary, will often give commentary that contradicts the words of Chazal, and that's not a problem because the Ibn Ezra is telling us what is called pshat, the simple reading of the pasuk. There is a way to understand it without going with the traditions of Chazal. That's the shita of the Ibn Ezra. Yeah, but the Manes Halevi and the Sfas Emes say the following principle, they say, Va'anachnu b'shem rabbeisenu hakadoshim nazkir. We have to go with the rabbis. We have to go with Chazal say. The Gemara says that everybody knew Mordechai came from Shaul. They actually had tainas on Mordechai, that why didn't Shaul kill Agag? And that's why we have Haman in the first place. So the question is, where is Shaul? Why isn't Shaul mentioned? There's a man conspicuously absent from Megillas Esther. His name is Shaul. But as we're going to see, he's referred to very clearly in a different pasuk. Look at number 6. In the most, I think this is the most famous pasuk in the Megillah. Ki im hacharesh tacharishi ba'es hazois revach v'hatzala ya'amay la'izim imakay macher ve'adu ve'savich toivedu mi yodem li'es kazois higa la'malchus. Mordechai says, Esther, if you're going to be quiet at this time, salvation will stand for the Jews from elsewhere, and you and your father's house will be destroyed. You and your father's house? What do you mean Esther's father's house? Esther's father's dead. Esther never saw her father. When her mother conceived Esther, the father died. What do you mean her father will be destroyed? We never saw her father in the story. He's not even in the narrative. He died before Esther was born. Says Amanos Halevi, the episode of Purim was the heavens. The Rebbeinu Shalom was giving Esther a chance to rectify the sin of Shaul. Shaul blew it. Shaul was told by the Navi, kill Agag, and Shaul kill Amalek, and Shaul came out with justifications and rationalizations why we need to keep Agag alive, why to keep the sheep alive. So Hashem gave the family of Shaul an opportunity to rectify their sin by Esther risking her life to go to Achashverosh to be able to somehow overcome Haman. Therefore Mordechai says, if you're going to remain silent at this time, not only will you go down in the history books, not only will history write you off, but Shaul will be eternally doomed in the afterlife. At ubeisavich toivedu, you will be destroyed, and so will your father Shaul. The reason why Shaul is not mentioned in Megillas Esther, says the Manos Halevi, Reb Shlomo Al-Kabetz, author of L'Chadoidi, because it's as if we're going back to Shaul's father and we're saying, take 2. Let's start this again. Let's make believe Shaul was never born. We're giving this one more chance. That's why Shaul is conspicuously absent. Ben Yair, Ben Shimi, Ben Kish. What happened to Shaul? Now, he blew it. We're giving this family one more chance. That is what the Manos Halevi says. And by the way, the Sfas Emes amazingly says that because Shaul sinned and he left Amalek, he's not mentioned. He says, I found in Reb Shlomo Al-Kabetz that since this was the opportunity for Shaul's sin to be atoned for, so it's like we're going back to Kish. By the way, Esther Rabbah teaches us that the whole purpose of Megillas Esther, Rabbi Levi, when he would teach Megillas Esther, he would begin with the pasuk that says that when you leave nations of the world in Eretz Yisrael, and you think you're doing it for world peace, and you're doing it to keep the world opinion on your side, you should know it will always come back to haunt you. That's the message of Megillas Esther. When you allow the nations of the world to hang around in the land of Israel, it will come back to haunt you. How do we see that? Because Shaul didn't kill Agag. He had a kid Amalek, he had a kid Haman, who almost was successful in eradicating the Jewish people. And boy, is that a very timely lesson. What is the lesson of Megillas Esther? Be careful for letting the nations of the world hang around the land of Israel. Okay? Where do we see this? Im loi soirishu es yoshvei haaretz mipnechem v'haya asher toisiru mehem lesikim be'einechem v'letzninim b'tzidechem. So the whole reason, Rabbi Isai, why the story of Purim happened, that we were threatened, was because Shaul allowed Agag to hang around one night. And now, what did Agag do that night?
Obviously.
He impregnated a shivcha. How? Kishuf. So you can imagine, if he's using kishuf, you can imagine what kind of progeny came out. Now, the Arizal says that Shaul's mistake is alluded to in a pasuk in the Chumash. You ready? Look at number 17. Vayaras Amalek, Vayisam Misholi Vayamar. Bilam sees Amalek. He lifts his mashal and he says, Reishis Goyim Amalek. Amalek is the earliest of nations. V'achrisei adei oived. And his end will be destruction. Vayisam Misholi Vayamar. Oy, mi yichya, misumay kel. Says Arizal, you know what this means? Bilam is foreseeing the end of Amalek, and he said, maybe you'll survive, but you won't live. Misu Michael, you might get by Shaul, but you're not going to get by Shmuel. You got that? Mi Yichya, Amalek, you're not going to live. Misu Michael, you ain't making it past Shmuel. Arizal. Or, Oy is going on the Jewish people. Woe to you Jews. Mi Yichya Misu Michael. Because you know who lived after Shmuel killed Agag? Haman. Mi Yichya, Oy, Klal Yisrael. Bilam is foreseeing, Oy, woe to you, Klal Yisrael. Mi Yichya. You think you're going to live Mi Shmuel from the guy who survived Shmuel? Because you know who came from Agag? Haman. Now, you know what tonight is? Do you know whose yahrzeit is tonight? Now, usually when I ask that question, there's always someone in the audience who says, the Avnei Nezer. Doesn't matter what day of the year it is. The Avnei Nezer. But tonight he's right. Tonight he's right. Sachachav. Sachachav. But if you want to come to Sachachav, this year, Lag BaOmer, the only connection between Sachachav and Ragachav is the rhyme. If let's say you had a gramen, and you're like, the line ended with Sachachav, you're stuck. You need a Ragachaver to bail you out of that one, right? Anyway, the Ragachaver is tonight? Wow. But you know who else's yahrzeit is tonight? The Chida. Yud Aleph Adar. So you say it was the Chida's yahrzeit Yud Aleph Adar Aleph. That's true. Ashkenazim, we do Adar Aleph. Sfaradim do both a little bit. Tonight's the Chida. I didn't even realize when I was preparing, but of course we have an epic Chida tonight. So, says the Hilig Chida in the Kisei David that Shmuel now approaches Agag, and Agag knows his hours are numbered. Number 21. And Agag says, Vayomer Agag, Achein, Sar, Mar Hamaves. Indeed, it has been departed the bitterness of death. What does that mean, it has departed the bitterness of death? Says the Chida that Agag was very worried that he would be killed by a mere simpleton. And when he sees that Shmuel is coming to kill him, he says, the bitterness of death has been removed. Because now they are being killed by a Navi, so death is bad, but the bitterness has been removed. Or, besides the bitterness of death, to die without children, that's very painful. So therefore, but Agag had an intuition that he impregnated the shivcha. So he's saying, without without saying clearly, the bitterness of death has been removed because I know I have progeny. But says the Chida, mamish, unbelievable. What's the gematria of Mar? What's the gematria of Mar? 240. Who's 240? Amalek. The bitterness of death has departed because I made sure to preserve Amalek in the world. Because just last night, I was able to produce and impregnate the shivcha. So it says the Chida, Achin Sar Mar Hamaves. The bitterness of death has been removed. Therefore, says the Al Shech HaKadosh, Mordechai says to Esther, if you don't take advantage of this moment, then you know what's going to happen? Not only will you be destroyed, your father's house will be destroyed eternally. Says Amanis Halevi, when Shaul sinned by leaving Agag alive, the Navi criticizes him with 10 accusations. If you look in Shmuel Aleph, Park Tezvav, number 1, Kishav me'acharai, Devarai loy hekim, loy shamata b'kol Hashem, v'atad el hashalal, v'atas hara. You despised, you didn't do, you didn't listen. You died in treachery. So therefore, says the Manas Halevi, when the Jews killed Amalek in times of Purim, they rectified all 10 infractions of Shaul. Therefore, the word Yehudim is always spelled with an extra Yud. What else do they do? 3 times in the Megillah it says, Aseres, B'nei Haman, Ben Hamidasa, Serer Hayudim, Haragu, Uvabiza, Lo Yishalchu, Es Yadam. They didn't take the spoils. Rabbi Yitz, why didn't they take the spoils? Why didn't they take the spoils? The answer is, one of the biggest accusations against Shaul, look in 25, Shmuel Aleph, Perek Tetzvav Yutes, Vatad el Hashalal. He went after the spoils. He wasn't allowed to take the spoils. So to rectify the sin of Shaul, the Jewish people went out of their way not to take the spoils. So that's the Menasalim. By the way, Uva biza loy shalchu es yadam. The words uva biza loy shalchu es Rashi Tevos Shaul. Why didn't they take the spoils? Uva biza vav loy lamed shalchu shin es aleph. They didn't take the spoils because they rectified the sin of Shaul. Okay, Rabbi Glatstein, fasten your seatbelts. Lap. Yeah. What happened? I dropped something? The spoils. Don't take the spoils. Okay. Haman made the tree. And he's looking for Mordechai, and he sees that Mordechai and all the children are congregated in the Beis HaMedrash. They're wearing sackcloth. They're being oisek in Torah. They were tsoyek. They cried out, uboicha. And there were 22,000 children. Haman tied them up in iron. He appointed guards. He said, tomorrow I will kill all of you. And the mothers came and they brought them food and water because they said, we like a good Jewish mother. Don't die hungry. It's not becoming to die hungry. You need to be well fed before you die. So the mothers came to feed them, and they put their hands on their svarim and they swore that they won't eat, they're going to die in tinus. They began to cry out. The lashon of the medrash is, Ba'oisa sha nisgalgalu racham av shal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. At that moment, the mercy of God was prevailed. Va'amad mikisei din, God stood up from the throne of judgment. V'yashav mikisei rachamim, He sat on the throne of mercy. Va'amar, Ma kol gadol hazeh. What's this voice that I hear? Kigediyim utlam. It sounds like sheep. The Shla says, what? God doesn't know that they're children? It sounds like sheep? How does it sound like sheep? Why do they sound like sheep? Says the Gemara, says the Medrash, at that moment, Hashem took the letters that were signed with cement and He tore it up. The Shla HaKadosh asks, what does it mean that it sounds like sheep? What did Hashem mean? It sounds like sheep. Says the Shla HaKadosh, something mamish out of this world. Says the Shla HaKadosh, what was the sin that brought about the Gzeira of Purim? The fact that Shaul didn't kill Agag. And when he didn't kill Agag, what happened? He didn't kill the sheep. And what did Shmuel say? Uma koil hatzoin. What's the sound of the sheep? And now the Shla says, mamish 3 words, you can miss it, I don't want anyone to miss it. And when they were crying, they were doing tshuva. And when you do teshuva out of fear, then the sins are downgraded. But one of the phenomena we like to talk about is that when you do tshuva out of love, the sin is transformed into a zechus. So now, retroactively, they're crying out, not only reminded God of the sin that they let the sheep survive, but the fact that they let the sheep survive accrued to them as a mitzvah. It was a mitzvah that they let the sheep survive. And now we come to one of the most astounding chidushim you'll ever hear. You ready for this? You sure? Let's take a vote if you're ready for this. Let's think for a moment. That Arizal says the greatest light that ever came down to this world was the miracle of Purim. It's greater than Shabbos, it's greater than Yom Tif, it's greater than Yom Kippur. It's greater. It's the greatest spiritual energy that ever came down to him. At what were the Jews doing at the time that God began to bring down this great spiritual light? Right? When Hashem's orchestrating events to bring about our salvation, what were the Jewish people doing at that moment? They were committing the worst sin in the history of the world. They were nana from the Suda Achashverosh. Because at that party, God was giving Achashverosh the idea to invite Vashti, knowing she's not going to listen, knowing that Vashti is going to be killed. So while God is bringing the greatest shefa of Kedusha to the world, what are we doing? We're blowing it. We're committing the biggest sin in the history of Klal Yisrael. Why would Hashem do that? Comes the Megillah Sisar. Megillah Sisar is the purest of the Nesivos HaMishpat of Megillah Esther. One of the most important classic perushim on the Megillah. Megillah Sisar, number 34. He says, isn't it odd that we have a mitzvah on Purim to have a Suda? What are we doing? We're commemorating the biggest Aveira in history. Think about it. You get around your table, you're all drinking wine. Hey guys, what are you doing? Oh, we're just commemorating the biggest sin in the history of the Jewish people. No. It was the biggest sin in the history of the Jewish people. But what did the Jewish people do to deserve salvation? We did tshuva. And once we did tshuva, how does the Shamayim look at the being nana at the Suda of Achashverosh? Is it erased? No. It's more than erased. It's viewed as a mitzvah. Now, what kind of mitzvah is it? Is it viewed as a little mitzvah? A medium-sized mitzvah? A pretty big mitzvah? It's viewed as the biggest mitzvah in the history of the Jewish people. Because the bigger the sin, the more the tshuva you need, then the tshuva transforms the Aveira into a mitzvah. Now, we've quoted in the past from the Chassam Sofer that let's say somebody ate at McDonald's or Wendy's or Burger King or Kentucky Fried Chicken, any of the above mentioned establishments, and then they do tshuva. It's considered like they ate the Korban Pesach. Now don't try that at home. You can't go to Wendy's and say, well, I never ate a Korban Pesach, so I'm going to go to Wendy's and I'm going to do tshuva me'aba. Because ha'omer echta ve'ashuv ein maspik miyada lasas tshuva. But if somebody was nichshal, that's why the Heilige Chida, can you imagine it's on Yud Aleph Adar. You know what the Chida says? I b'makayim shabalei tshuva oimdim ein tzadikim gemur micham lamed. Because what could a tzaddik do already? A tzaddik has very few mitzvahs he could do. He could wear tzitzis, he could wear tefillin, he could learn Torah, he could do chesed. But the Rasha, there's so many averos that he could do that get transformed into mitzvahs that if he ever does tshuva, he's a million light years ahead of the tzaddik. The Chidah says that's pshat b'makom shabali tshuva. So it comes out that after Klal Yisrael did tshuva, being nena, the mishteh of Achashverosh, was the greatest mitzvah in the history of Klal Yisrael. So how could we not commemorate this great zechus that Klal Yisrael has? Which zechus? The zechus of being nene at the Suda of Achashverosh. Interesting, no? The mitzvah of Purim is to show that when a Jew does tshuva, not only is it wiped away, not only is it turned into a zechus? It's such a valuable zechus, we could have a mitzvah to commemorate the sin to begin with. Okay, that's the nesivas. Comes Rav Shlomo Kluger, and Rav Shlomo Kluger says, the question was, how could Hashem orchestrate that through the meal of Esther, the Klal Yisrael will have a Yeshua, but ein kategar nasa sanegar. Wasn't the meal a sin? So how could Hashem bring about salvation through a meal? Yeah, true. The meal was a sin. But then Klal Yisrael, Esther said, Lech, he says, Kol hayudim. The sin was turned into a mitzvah. So there's no more ein kategar nasa sanegar. It wasn't a kategar. It was never a kategar. Retroactively, it wasn't a prosecutor, it was a defense. I don't know what kind of tshuva that was. Was that tshuva me'ahava? Maybe that wasn't tshuva me'ahava. Because it was Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is not tshuva me'ahava. Okay. Now we're going to take this. It's a pretty wild chiddush. That means, can you imagine, what are we doing on Purim? Mamish v'nahapoichu. We're commemorating sin.
These were only the Jews
in Shushan? That's what the Gemara says. Truth is, he made the party of 180 days for the Jews everywhere, for all the Medinos. It was only the 7 days at the end that was for Shushan. So the Gemara's question, well, then only the Jews of Shushan should be destroyed. It's not Pasha. Why should only the Jews of Shushan be destroyed? But everyone else was partying for 180 days. Okay, it's a good question, but the Gemara is not so simple. Now, this is, whatever we said till now, we're going to take it even, okay, you ready for this? You ready? So basically what we're saying is, that even though, think about it, what do we do on Purim? We commemorate sin. Why would we do that? Because the sin is transformed into a great mitzvah. So we're commemorating a great mitzvah. And how could Hashem bring about salvation through a party, but ain't kategar nasa sanegar? No, Rav Shlomo Kluger says, the party is not a kategar. Ask the Sfas Emes. The greatest light in the history of the world, the greatest salvation in the history of the world was what? Purim. When did God choose to bring that great light and salvation to the world? What were we doing? We were sinning egregiously. Why would God choose that moment? Since He knew that ultimately we would do tshuva, it was already considered a zechus before we did the tshuva, that God loved it so much that He already paved the way to bring about the geula at that moment, even though we were sinning and we didn't even think about doing tshuva yet, because since we would eventually do tshuva, so then retroactively from the beginning, God considered it a mitzvah to begin with. I'm not saying it. I don't think I could ever say that. Sfas Emes writes that. I want to read to you his words. By the way, don't accept anything I'm saying. You need to see it for yourself. I want to read to you the words of Sfas Emes. The Sfas Emes is on page 5. It's the top right-hand side. Pele sheba oisa hamishta atzma nasa hahatzola sheneher gavashti az. V'zehu ke'ein amram zal b'tshuva me'ahava hazedoinois nefchu l'zechuyos v'akadosh baruch hu ra. God saw sheyashuva b'tshuva shlema, that we would do tshuva. Can you imagine that? God knew with foresight we would do tshuva. So even though right now, think about it, that means Hashem works on two levels. We're sinning egregiously. So He's allowing Haman to make a decree at that very moment, because at the end of the day, right now we're sinning. But the foreknowledge of God is making it that since He knows we're going to do tshuva, at the same time we're falling out of favor with Him, we're also finding favor with Him.
What do you say? That the kapara that HaKadosh Baruch Hu already has the refuah?
Hashem brings the refuah before the makkah. But this is like a very complex thing to wrap your mind around. That at the same time that God is allowing Haman to make this decree because we're sinning so egregiously, at the very same moment, because he knows we're going to do tshuva, this Maisa itself is finding favor in Gaza. So, God gave us the Torah. No thank you. No thanks. Why? We're not on such a high level. You know why? Because we don't really have such a big zechus in our arsenal to propel us to such great heights. What zechus do we have? That we followed God into the midbar? Okay, it's bitachain. That we accepted the Torah? Very nice. But we don't have the requisite zechuyos to propel us to great heights. Not until 1,000 years later, when we fell rock bottom. When we did tshuva for that Aveira, that sin, which was so horrendous, was transformed into literally the greatest zechus in the history of the Jewish people, and it catapulted us to the highest level we were ever on. Hema, the Gra says, the 50th level even, and we were makabel the tshuva be'ahava. So if somebody asks, what mitzvah did Klal Yisrael do that allowed us to be zoicha to Kabbalah Satar? The answer is the great mitzvah of being neneh from the Suda of Achashverosh. The great zechus of the worst sin in the history of the Jewish people.
What was the sin of being neneh from the Suda
There,
of Achashverosh?
either it was full-fledged Gilui Arayos, or pretty much because it was celebrating the fact that the Beis HaMikdash lay in ruins. Okay, now.
Also, they have the Kelim of
Kelim Beis HaMikdash.
Achashverosh was wearing the Shmone
The Begadim. Yeah. So, with all of, they were defiling the Kachim. So Shmuel comes to Shaul. You ready for the Rishner? Here's the key. Shmuel comes to Shaul. And Shmuel's like, what? I told you to kill Amalek. What's going on over here? I hear all the sheep and I see Agag. What's going on? Shaul said, what are you talking about? You know what I've accomplished for the Jewish people? Because I didn't kill Agag, the whole story of Purim happened. And because of the story of Purim, they accepted the Torah ba'ava. So if there's anyone who upheld the word of Hashem, it's me. Hakimoisi es devar Hashem. Me, I upheld the word of Hashem. Because of my Maisa, whether you like it or not, whether you like what I did or not, but because I left Agag alive, there's going to be a Haman, and Klal Yisrael are going to do tshuva for being neneh, and that's going to catapult them to the highest level. So, thank you very much. Hakimoisi es devar Hashem. The highest level in the history of the Jewish people, it's thanks to me. You think I didn't listen to the word of Hashem. Now, is this really what Shaul had in mind? The Rishner said, that's the meaning of these prophetic words. Because of my infraction, I upheld the word of Hashem. And this all came about as a result of what Shaul did. And ultimately, Esther risks her life. She goes into Achashverosh, and she is the shliach of Klal Yisrael and of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring about Yeshua. And she brings tikkun not only to herself, but lebeis aviha. And in that merit, Klal Yisrael were makabel Torah ba'ahava, and therefore the words of Shaul are understood to mean Hakimoisi es devar Hashem. I upheld the word of Hashem. I wish everybody a Freilich Purim. Everyone's invited to join us at our house on Purim Day, anytime, especially between 1 and 3. At 638 Oakland Avenue.
Why was this kingdom worship taken away?
Because the Navi said,
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.